A broadcast can be interrupted. A mystery can be recorded. But what happens after the screen returns to normal is often far more revealing than the interruption itself. As investigators replay every frame, one unsettling discovery emerges. The evidence is abundant, the witnesses are countless, and yet the identity behind the mask seems to retreat further away with every answer they uncover. If you are watching this right now, I want to ask you something. What really happened? Because every case you are about to hear has one thing in common. The investigation was closed. The file was sealed. And the truth was never found. These are the cases that detectives couldn't solve, that witnesses couldn't explain, and that official records couldn't account for. If you are someone who needs to know what really happened, you are in the right place. Subscribe to Unsolved Vault and join thousands of investigators uncovering the case's history left unfinished. Welcome back. This is Unsolved Vault. And today, we open a case that was never meant to stay closed. The recording begins inside an ordinary television broadcast before the image suddenly gives way to something unfamiliar. The screen fills with the unmistakable face of the Max Headroom figure, positioned before a moving metallic background that seems both polished and unstable. The picture wavers slightly, producing faint distortions that hint at an imperfect transmission rather than a finished production. Every visual detail appears carefully arranged, yet nothing about the scene belongs within the program that viewers have been watching only moments before. The first impression comes as much from sound as from image. A low electronic hiss accompanies the unstable picture, while the voice emerges through brief interruptions and uneven rhythm. Words arrive with mechanical hesitation, echoing the style of the fictional character but carrying an unfamiliar edge. Background noise blends with the broadcast signal, creating a listening experience that feels uncertain without becoming completely unintelligible. Instead of offering immediate clarity, the recording invites careful attention, encouraging each listener to notice details that might otherwise disappear. As the seconds pass, the figure begins to move with deliberate confidence. Small gestures replace the still pose of the opening moment, and the unusual performance gradually becomes more animated. The metallic background continues its endless motion while the camera remains fixed, allowing every shift in posture to draw greater attention. Brief visual interference crosses the picture, then fades almost as quickly as it appeared. The interruption develops in measured stages, revealing new details little by little instead of overwhelming the viewer all at once. Watching the recording today creates a different experience from watching it live in 1987. Modern viewers already know they are observing an unsolved mystery, and that knowledge quietly shapes every frame. Ordinary movements begin to feel significant because each one might contain a clue overlooked for decades. The recording stops being simple evidence of a broadcast intrusion and becomes something more reflective. It asks whether meaning can truly be recovered from a few uncertain moments, or whether some mysteries preserve their power precisely because every answer remains incomplete. The interruption unfolded in two separate broadcasts that evening, and together they formed the complete mystery remembered today. The first intrusion occurred during a sports segment on WGN-TV. For roughly 25 seconds, the regular program disappeared and the Max Headroom figure occupied the screen. There was no clear message, no dramatic announcement, and very little movement. The picture itself struggled to remain stable, suggesting that whoever transmitted the signal was fighting to maintain control. Then, almost as suddenly as it had begun, the authorized broadcast returned and the program continued. At first, many viewers assumed they had witnessed nothing more than an unusual technical failure. Television occasionally produced brief distortions, particularly in an era when over-the-air broadcasts depended on powerful radio signals. The interruption was strange, but its short duration left little time for careful observation. Engineers inside the station recognized that something unusual had happened, yet the incident ended before many immediate answers could be found. For a brief period, it seemed possible that the unexplained event would become little more than an odd technical story discussed inside broadcasting circles. That expectation changed later the same evening. During a broadcast on WTTW, a second interruption appeared. This time the unknown figure remained on screen for much longer, giving viewers an extended look at the strange performance. The metallic background slowly shifted behind the mask while the speaker delivered fragmented remarks in the familiar style of Max Headroom. Some sentences sounded playful, others appeared deliberately confusing, and several references seemed directed toward local television personalities or events that many viewers would not immediately recognize. Rather than offering a clear statement, the performance wandered through disconnected ideas that became increasingly difficult to interpret. The recording preserved every awkward pause, every unexpected gesture, and every moment of visual instability. Nothing unfolded with the polished rhythm of professional television. Small imperfections surrounded the performance, from occasional signal interference to subtle changes in picture quality. These flaws became important because they hinted that the hijacking relied on technical improvisation rather than studio perfection. The unknown broadcaster appeared prepared, but they were also working within limitations imposed by the equipment and circumstances surrounding the intrusion. Looking closely at the sequence reveals an unusual balance between planning and unpredictability. The disguise had been assembled in advance. The background had clearly been chosen. The timing required knowledge of broadcasting systems. Yet once the signal reached viewers, the performance unfolded with an almost spontaneous quality that resisted easy interpretation. It felt rehearsed in places and improvised in others. That combination has continued to puzzle researchers for decades. Every second of the recording appears intentional, yet the overall purpose remains frustratingly uncertain. The longer the footage is examined, the more it resembles a carefully staged puzzle whose creator understood that confusion could become more memorable than any straightforward explanation ever could. The figure's appearance quickly became only one part of the evidence. Investigators and later researchers began examining the recording frame by frame, searching for details hidden behind the obvious performance. The moving metallic background attracted particular attention because it appeared too convincing to be a simple television effect created in real time. Many believed it was a physical backdrop rotating behind the performer rather than a digital animation. That possibility suggested careful preparation. Even the setting seemed designed to imitate the familiar visual style associated with Max Headroom while remaining achievable with ordinary equipment. The audio invited even closer examination. Beneath the altered voice, listeners detected changes in volume, background sounds, and occasional hints of the recording environment. Some noises appeared accidental rather than intentional, raising questions about the location where the performance had been filmed. Researchers listened repeatedly for echoes, electrical hums, or other small clues that might identify the room. Yet every promising observation produced several competing explanations. The recording revealed fragments of its surroundings without providing enough certainty to transform those fragments into reliable evidence. Attention also turned toward the speaker's behavior. Certain remarks seemed directed at local television personalities, suggesting familiarity with Chicago broadcasting rather than random selection. Gestures occasionally appeared exaggerated, almost theatrical, while other moments felt unexpectedly casual. The performance moved between humor, mockery, and deliberate absurdity without settling into a single purpose. This shifting tone complicated every attempt to understand the speaker's intentions. Were they trying to entertain, provoke, criticize, or simply confuse? The recording refused to commit itself to any one interpretation, leaving each possibility partly supported and partly challenged by what followed. One brief sequence became especially memorable because it departed sharply from ordinary television conventions. The performance grew increasingly bizarre, introducing actions that seemed designed more to unsettle than to communicate. Instead of building toward a clear conclusion, the recording drifted into behavior that appeared deliberately unpredictable. That choice has remained significant because it reduced the chance that viewers would discover a straightforward message hidden beneath the performance. The mystery became attached not only to the identity of the hijacker, but also to the unusual structure of the broadcast itself. Viewed as historical evidence, the recording behaves almost like an unfinished document. Every repeated viewing uncovers another small observation, yet none provides the decisive answer that researchers continue to seek. The visual distortions, fragmented speech, improvised gestures, and curious background together create a record that feels remarkably complete while remaining fundamentally unresolved. Rather than revealing the person behind the disguise, the footage seems to preserve only their intention to remain unknown. That balance between visibility and concealment has helped transform fewer than 90 seconds of television into one of the most closely examined recordings in broadcasting history. As investigators replayed the footage, attention gradually shifted away from the strange performance and toward its timing. Every second the unauthorized signal remained on air represented a technical achievement as well as a theatrical one. Broadcast stations did not surrender control easily. To interrupt an active transmission, the unknown operator had to deliver a stronger signal to the receiving equipment than the authorized broadcast at precisely the right moment. This requirement narrowed the field of possibility. The recording no longer looked like the product of random opportunity. It reflected preparation measured in timing, equipment, and careful execution. The changing quality of the picture added another layer to the mystery. At certain moments, the image appeared remarkably clear, suggesting that the replacement signal briefly dominated the authorized broadcast. Then small disturbances crossed the screen before the picture recovered again. These fluctuations hinted at an invisible contest taking place beyond the view of the audience. Two signals occupied the same space, competing for control while viewers saw only the result. The recording captured the visible outcome of that struggle, but the technical battle itself remained hidden behind the final image reaching household televisions. Researchers also noticed what was absent from the footage. There were no visible landmarks identifying the location. No accidental reflections revealed surrounding buildings. No obvious clues pointed toward a studio, warehouse, or private room. The camera remained tightly focused on the performer, limiting the amount of useful information available. Even the unusual metallic background concealed more than it revealed. Every practical decision seemed to reduce the chances that later investigators could identify where the recording had been made. The performance invited attention while quietly withholding the details that mattered most. The conclusion of the broadcast arrived with almost the same unpredictability as its beginning. The signal disappeared, regular programming returned, and the interruption ended without explanation. Viewers received no final statement and no claim of responsibility. The unknown broadcaster vanished as completely as they had appeared. That abrupt ending became part of the mystery because it denied audiences the sense of completion that most performances naturally provide. Instead of resolving the strange sequence, the final moments preserved its uncertainty, leaving questions suspended long after the authorized broadcast resumed. Looking back today, the footage feels remarkably disciplined despite its chaotic appearance. Beneath the bizarre humor and distorted visuals lay careful choices about framing, timing, disguise, and concealment. The unknown individual revealed enough to ensure the event would never be forgotten, yet withheld enough to avoid clear identification. That balance has frustrated investigators for decades. Every frame appears to promise discovery, but every closer examination ends at the same quiet boundary, where visible evidence reaches its limit and speculation begins. The recording survives not because it explains itself, but because it continues to resist explanation while inviting each new generation to look one more time. When the final seconds of the hijacking are viewed today, they feel strangely incomplete. The signal fades, the authorized program returns, and the ordinary rhythm of television quietly resumes. There is no dramatic escape, no closing statement, and no visible trace of the people responsible. The interruption ends almost as if it had never happened. Yet the absence of a conclusion becomes one of its defining features. Instead of answering questions, the recording leaves them suspended, encouraging viewers to revisit the footage in search of details that may never have been intended to explain anything. Over the years, specialists have examined the recording using techniques unavailable when it first aired. Individual frames have been enlarged, audio has been filtered, and visual distortions have been studied in remarkable detail. Every improvement in technology has brought fresh hope that hidden evidence might finally emerge. Small observations have certainly appeared. Researchers have debated the construction of the background, the quality of the transmission, the speaker's movements, and the sequence of events. Yet each new discovery has led to further discussion rather than a confirmed identity. The recording continues to reveal fragments while protecting its central secret. The footage has also changed in another important way. It is no longer viewed only as evidence from a criminal investigation. It has become a historical document, preserving a brief moment when confidence in broadcast television was unexpectedly interrupted. Modern audiences often approach the recording with knowledge unavailable to the original viewers. They understand its reputation before pressing play. That awareness changes the experience, inviting careful observation instead of immediate confusion. Every pause, every flicker, and every unusual gesture is examined with the expectation that meaning may be hiding within the smallest details. Perhaps the greatest mystery lies not in what appears on the screen, but in what never appears at all. The unknown broadcaster never offered a clear explanation. No reliable confession has emerged. No definitive proof has connected the performance to a specific individual or group. The recording remains remarkably generous with images while remaining exceptionally guarded with identity. It presents a face that everyone recognizes and conceals the face that everyone wants to see. That quiet contradiction has allowed fewer than 90 seconds of television to occupy a lasting place in media history. With the interruption now carefully reconstructed, the mystery begins to widen beyond the recording itself. The strange images have been observed, the sounds considered, and the performance examined from every practical angle. Yet the footage alone cannot explain why the event unfolded or who possessed the knowledge required to make it possible. In the next part, attention shifts from the broadcast to the people who witnessed its aftermath. Engineers, journalists, television stations, and ordinary viewers each carried away different questions, and together their reactions reveal how a brief intrusion grew into one of the most enduring unsolved mysteries in broadcasting history. We've examined the recording itself, but the real story begins after the signal disappears. The next chapter follows the people left behind, engineers, journalists, and ordinary viewers, as they each try to understand what they had just witnessed. The broadcast ended, but its effects spread quietly through Chicago in many different directions. Television stations returned to scheduled programming as if nothing unusual had happened, while office buildings, apartments, restaurants, and suburban homes settled back into familiar evening routines. From the outside, the city looked unchanged. Cars continued along wet streets, lights glowed behind windows, and late broadcasts filled countless screens. Yet hidden beneath that ordinary appearance, one brief interruption had already begun to separate the evening from every other night. For those who had witnessed the strange transmission, the memory lingered in different ways. Some questioned whether they had really seen what appeared on the screen. Others replayed the unusual voice and unsettling image in quiet conversation with family members or neighbors. Telephone calls reached television stations as viewers searched for reassurance rather than explanation. Confusion carried its own atmosphere. Familiar broadcasts had always felt dependable, and the interruption left behind a subtle feeling that something trusted had unexpectedly slipped beyond ordinary understanding. Inside broadcasting facilities, attention shifted from surprise to response. Engineers compared observations, reviewed technical readings, and reconstructed the sequence of events while station staff gathered every available detail before memories faded. Producers spoke with technicians, managers contacted colleagues, and recorded copies of the interruption became increasingly important. The mystery no longer belonged only to viewers. It entered meeting rooms, control centers, and newsroom discussions, where each new piece of information promised clarity while introducing another uncertainty that demanded equal attention. The city now shared an experience without sharing a single explanation. Every witness carried away a slightly different impression, shaped by where they had been, what they noticed, and how long they watched before the signal returned to normal. That quiet difference became part of the mystery itself. The interruption had lasted only moments, yet it produced countless individual memories instead of one complete account. Before investigators searched for the unknown broadcaster, Chicago had already begun searching its own uncertain recollections, hoping that somewhere among them a hidden truth might quietly emerge. By the following morning, the interruption had already begun to move beyond private conversations. Local television stations received calls from viewers asking what had happened and whether the strange broadcast had been caused by equipment failure. Some callers described only a brief distortion, while others recalled the appearance of the masked figure in surprising detail. The differences between these accounts reflected the nature of memory itself. A few seconds of unexpected television had been experienced by thousands of people, yet no two descriptions sounded exactly alike. Newsrooms approached the event from another perspective. Reporters quickly realized they were dealing with more than an ordinary technical problem. Broadcast interruptions were unusual, but deliberate signal hijackings were exceptionally rare. Journalists began speaking with station representatives, engineers, and communications specialists in an effort to understand how such an intrusion could happen. Early reports remained cautious because reliable information was limited. Rather than offering dramatic conclusions, newspapers and broadcasters acknowledged that an unidentified individual had managed to interfere with two separate television transmissions under circumstances that were still being examined. Inside the affected stations, recorded copies of the broadcasts became valuable evidence almost immediately. Engineers reviewed the interruptions repeatedly, looking beyond the bizarre performance to examine picture quality, timing, and signal behavior. Every visual distortion and every change in audio might reveal something about the method used to overpower the authorized transmission. Staff compared notes from different departments, hoping that a seemingly unimportant observation could connect with another overlooked detail. The process required patience because technical investigations often depend upon small pieces of information rather than dramatic discoveries. The event also encouraged conversations among people with broadcasting experience throughout Chicago. Former engineers, amateur radio enthusiasts, and technical hobbyists discussed the unusual circumstances with growing interest. Many understood enough about transmission systems to recognize that the hijacking demanded considerable planning. Some believed it required expensive equipment. Others argued that knowledge and careful positioning mattered more than cost. These discussions gradually expanded beyond the television stations themselves, introducing new ideas while also creating fresh disagreements about what was technically possible. As these different reactions unfolded, uncertainty became part of the story rather than a temporary obstacle. Viewers searched for reassurance, journalists searched for facts, engineers searched for evidence, and technical observers searched for explanations. Each group examined the same event through a different lens, producing conclusions that occasionally overlapped but rarely matched completely. Instead of narrowing the mystery, the growing number of perspectives made it richer and more complicated. The interruption had ended in less than 2 minutes, yet its aftermath unfolded slowly across conversations, investigations, and quiet speculation, allowing the unanswered questions to spread through the city almost as effectively as the original broadcast itself. For many viewers, the mystery settled into memory before it settled into history. People returned to work, attended school, and followed their normal routines. Yet the unusual broadcast found its way back into everyday conversation. Break rooms, classrooms, cafes, and family kitchens became places where the interruption was quietly reconstructed from memory. One person remembered the strange background. Another recalled the distorted voice. Someone else insisted the picture had lasted longer than it actually had. Each retelling reshaped the event in small ways, allowing uncertainty to grow alongside recollection. Television stations experienced a different passage of time. While the public discussed possibilities, technical staff organized records, preserved recordings, and documented everything known about the incident. Broadcast logs, engineering notes, and staff observations were treated with unusual care because even routine information might later prove important. The ordinary paperwork of television suddenly became historical evidence. Documents created during a normal working shift now carried unexpected significance, preserving details that memory alone could never reliably protect. The mystery also reached people who had not witnessed the hijacking firsthand. Friends described it to friends. Newspaper articles introduced it to readers who had missed the original broadcasts. Local radio programs discussed the unusual event, often repeating only the facts that could be confirmed. As the story spread, imagination naturally filled the spaces left by missing information. Some listeners pictured a sophisticated criminal operation. Others imagined an elaborate practical joke carried out by technically gifted enthusiasts. The absence of clear answers encouraged every listener to construct a different version of the unknown individuals responsible. Broadcast professionals understood that public curiosity could easily move ahead of available evidence. They recognized the importance of separating confirmed observations from speculation, even when both appeared equally convincing. This careful approach often sounded less satisfying than dramatic theories, yet it reflected the reality of technical investigations. Reliable conclusions required patience, repeated examination, and a willingness to leave difficult questions unanswered until stronger evidence emerged. In many respects, restraint became as valuable as technical knowledge. Looking back, these early reactions reveal something larger than the hijacking itself. They show how people respond when an event disrupts a system they have always trusted. Some search for immediate explanations. Others collect facts with deliberate care. Many simply carry the experience forward, waiting for clarity that may never arrive. Chicago responded in all of these ways at once. The city did not produce one unified story after the interruption. Instead, it produced hundreds of overlapping memories, careful investigations, thoughtful discussions, and quiet uncertainties. Together, those responses became an essential part of the mystery, proving that the aftermath of an unexplained event can sometimes reveal as much about a community as the event that first unsettled it. As the days passed, the interruption slowly moved from current news into local legend. Newspapers published follow-up reports whenever new information became available, yet each update seemed to confirm how little investigators truly knew. No credible claim of responsibility emerged. No reliable witness stepped forward with a complete account. The silence surrounding the unknown broadcaster gradually became as remarkable as the broadcast itself. Every day without an answer strengthened the impression that whoever planned the intrusion had also planned a successful escape from public identification. Within the engineering community, the discussion followed a quieter path. Technical specialists compared transmission maps, equipment capabilities, and broadcast procedures, attempting to identify the practical conditions required for such an intrusion. These conversations rarely focused on the bizarre performance shown on screen. Instead, they centered on signal strength, line of sight, transmission timing, and the physical realities of broadcast infrastructure. To many engineers, the mystery represented an unusually difficult technical puzzle rather than a cultural curiosity. Solving the method became just as important as identifying the individual responsible. Ordinary viewers approached the mystery differently. Many remembered not the engineering challenge, but the feeling created by the interruption itself. It had appeared unexpectedly inside a familiar evening, leaving behind an impression that ordinary television had briefly become unpredictable. That emotional memory proved remarkably durable. Even people who could not recall every detail of the recording often remembered the moment they realized something was wrong. The interruption became attached to personal experience as much as to historical fact, allowing it to remain vivid long after other television broadcasts from the same period had been forgotten. This difference in perspective quietly expanded the mystery. Engineers searched for practical explanations. Journalists sought verifiable facts. Viewers carried personal impressions shaped by surprise and uncertainty. None of these approaches was incorrect, yet none could fully explain the event on its own. The hijacking occupied an unusual space where technical evidence, public memory, and media history continually overlapped. Every new discussion illuminated one aspect while leaving another in shadow, ensuring that no single interpretation could completely replace the others. Years later, these early reactions continue to influence how the Max Headroom hijacking is understood. The event survives not only because investigators failed to identify the people responsible, but because the city responded in so many different ways. Every preserved recording, newspaper report, engineering discussion, and personal recollection became another piece of a much larger historical record. Together, they reveal a community trying to understand something that arrived without warning and disappeared before anyone could properly grasp it. In that sense, the mystery did not end when the broadcast returned to normal. It quietly continued inside conversations, archives, and memories, where uncertainty itself became one of the most enduring pieces of evidence left behind. As time moved forward, Chicago gradually returned to its ordinary rhythm, but the interruption refused to disappear completely. New broadcasts replaced old ones, television schedules continued without interruption, and the technical systems that had briefly failed to protect the signal resumed their daily work. Yet beneath that familiar routine remained a quiet awareness that something extraordinary had happened. The event had exposed a hidden vulnerability that few people had imagined before that evening. Even after the immediate confusion faded, the unanswered questions continued to travel through conversations and professional discussions alike. The mystery also revealed how differently people define evidence. For engineers, evidence meant signal behavior, transmission strength, equipment limitations, and recorded technical observations. For journalists, it meant verified statements, documented facts, and reliable sources. For viewers, evidence often existed as memory, emotion, and the lingering impression left by an unexpected experience. Each perspective contributed something valuable. Yet none could complete the picture alone. The max headroom hijacking became a rare case where technical reality and human perception remained closely connected without ever fully aligning. Perhaps this explains why the story has endured far beyond the era that produced it. Many broadcast interruptions are remembered only by specialists because they leave behind technical records rather than compelling narratives. This event left both. It produced engineering questions that challenged experienced professionals while also creating an unforgettable image that remained fixed in public memory. The combination proved unusually powerful. One part appealed to reason, the other to curiosity. Together, they transformed a local broadcast incident into a mystery recognized far beyond the city where it first occurred. There is also something quietly revealing about the absence of certainty. Modern audiences often expect historical mysteries to end with newly discovered evidence or a long-hidden confession. The max headroom hijacking offers neither. Instead, it preserves an unusual balance between what can be confirmed and what remains unknown. The recording exists. The interruptions occurred. The technical challenge was real. Beyond those facts, the story gradually enters a landscape where careful analysis and thoughtful speculation stand side by side without merging into a single conclusion. With Chicago now left behind, the mystery begins to move into its next stage. The public has reacted, the broadcasts have been preserved, and the city has quietly accepted that one of its strangest television moments may never receive a complete explanation. The focus now turns toward those who carried the responsibility of finding answers. Federal investigators, broadcast engineers, and communications experts would begin tracing every available clue, hoping that somewhere within the technical evidence lay a path leading back to the unknown individual who briefly captured an entire city's attention before disappearing into silence. The reactions reveal how the city responded, but they still leave one crucial question unanswered. We now move behind closed doors, where investigators begin piecing together the technical evidence in hopes of finding the person who vanished almost as quickly as the broadcast itself appeared. Within hours of the hijacking, the investigation began behind closed doors rather than before television cameras. Engineering reports, broadcast recordings, transmission logs, and equipment readings were gathered from the affected stations with careful attention. Offices that usually focused on daily broadcasting turned into temporary centers of technical analysis. Every document, every recorded second, and every instrument reading carried unexpected importance because investigators believed the smallest overlooked detail might reveal how an unknown signal had briefly displaced an authorized broadcast across one of America's largest cities. The search unfolded through careful observation instead of dramatic pursuit. Engineers replayed the recordings while listening for hidden clues inside distorted audio. Technical specialists compared signal behavior with known broadcast patterns, hoping that unusual characteristics might suggest the equipment used during the intrusion. Conversations moved between television stations and federal authorities, each group contributing a different kind of expertise. The investigation carried a quiet intensity, shaped less by visible action than by the patient examination of evidence that rarely offered immediate certainty. As more information was collected, the direction of the inquiry gradually expanded. What first appeared to be a single unexplained interruption became a broader technical challenge involving transmission methods, timing, and geography. Specialists began considering where a pirate signal could have originated and what conditions would have been necessary for it to overpower an established broadcast. Each promising possibility encouraged another series of calculations, comparisons, and field discussions, slowly building a picture that was increasingly detailed yet frustratingly incomplete. The investigation revealed something unexpected about unsolved mysteries. Answers do not always disappear because evidence is missing. Sometimes the evidence survives in remarkable detail while refusing to point toward one clear conclusion. Every careful step taken by broadcasters, engineers, and investigators reflected confidence that the truth could be found through patient analysis. Yet even at this early stage, another possibility quietly emerged. The unknown broadcaster may have understood the investigation almost as well as the people pursuing it, leaving behind just enough evidence to prove the intrusion happened while withholding the details needed to explain who made it possible. One of the first challenges facing investigators was understanding exactly where the unauthorized signal had entered the broadcast chain. Unlike a physical crime scene, there were no footprints, damaged locks, or abandoned equipment waiting to be examined. The evidence existed almost entirely as radio waves that had already traveled across the city and disappeared. Only the recordings, engineering logs, and technical measurements remained. Investigators therefore had to reconstruct an invisible event, relying on science rather than physical traces to understand what had happened during those remarkable moments. Broadcast engineers knew that overpowering a television signal was far from simple. The authorized transmission originated from powerful facilities designed to cover large metropolitan areas with remarkable reliability. To replace that signal, even briefly, the hijacker needed more than determination. They required specialized transmitting equipment, careful positioning, and a clear understanding of how microwave relay links operated. The objective was not to overpower the entire broadcast network across the city. Instead, investigators believed the pirate signal likely targeted a specific relay path at exactly the right location, allowing it to temporarily dominate the incoming transmission before the station could respond. Federal authorities, including investigators from the Federal Communications Commission, joined the effort because deliberate interference with licensed broadcasts represented a serious violation of federal law. Their role extended beyond identifying a suspect. They also wanted to understand whether similar attacks could occur elsewhere if the weakness remained unaddressed. Engineers from affected stations worked alongside federal specialists, sharing technical records, equipment specifications, and observations gathered immediately after the incident. Every participant recognized that solving the mystery could strengthen the security of broadcast systems across the country. Despite this combined expertise, the investigation quickly encountered practical limitations. Radio signals leave very different evidence from physical objects. Once transmitted, they fade almost instantly, leaving investigators to analyze their effects rather than their presence. There was no preserved transmission waiting to be traced backward through the air. By the time the hijacking ended, the signal responsible had already vanished. The remaining clues described what the interruption looked and sounded like, but they revealed very little about the precise location from which it had originated. This reality transformed the investigation into an exercise in elimination rather than direct discovery. Investigators compared known transmission sites, estimated possible broadcast ranges, evaluated equipment requirements, and gradually ruled out scenarios that conflicted with the available evidence. Every discarded theory narrowed the possibilities, yet no surviving explanation identified a specific individual or location with certainty. The inquiry moved steadily forward through technical reasoning, but each promising lead eventually reached the same quiet boundary. Beyond that point, evidence became too limited to support confident conclusions. The mystery remained within reach of understanding, yet just beyond the point where understanding could become proof. As the investigation continued, attention increasingly turned toward the practical requirements of the hijacking rather than the strange performance itself. Specialists asked a series of methodical questions. What type of transmitting equipment would have been necessary? How close would the operator have needed to be to the targeted microwave relay? How long would it have taken to prepare such an operation without attracting attention? Each question narrowed the range of possibilities, Yet every answer introduced fresh uncertainties that prevented investigators from moving confidently toward a single suspect. Location became one of the most difficult puzzles. A successful signal intrusion depended not only on power but also on position. Microwave relay systems relied on carefully aligned paths between fixed points, meaning the hijacker likely understood where those invisible connections traveled across the city. Investigators studied maps, transmission routes, and elevated locations that could provide the required line of sight. Rooftops, tall buildings, and other suitable sites were considered, but Chicago offered many possibilities. The city's complex skyline created opportunities that were difficult to evaluate long after the event had ended. Time worked against the investigation in quiet but significant ways. Every day that passed increased the chance that temporary equipment had been dismantled, rented spaces had been vacated, or witnesses had forgotten small but meaningful observations. Unlike crimes involving permanent physical evidence, this case depended heavily upon fleeting circumstances. A vehicle parked in an unusual place, unfamiliar equipment carried onto a rooftop, or unexpected activity near a transmission path might have seemed important only in hindsight. By the time investigators understood what questions needed asking, many potential clues had already disappeared into ordinary city life. The unknown broadcaster also appeared to have benefited from careful restraint. No reliable public claim of responsibility followed the hijacking. No letters arrived containing convincing proof. No verified recordings emerged explaining the planning behind the intrusion. This silence forced investigators to rely almost entirely on technical evidence instead of personal testimony. Ironically, the absence of communication became one of the most revealing aspects of the case. Whoever carried out the operation seemed content to let the broadcast speak for itself while avoiding every opportunity to transform attention into recognition. As more possibilities were explored, the investigation gradually shifted from searching for obvious mistakes to searching for subtle patterns. Specialists compared technical knowledge, local broadcasting experience, and the cultural references made during the performance, wondering whether together they might suggest a particular background or community. Yet these clues pointed in several directions at once. The individual behind the mask appeared technically capable, familiar with local television, and comfortable performing before a camera, but none of those qualities was especially rare on its own. Combined, they formed an intriguing profile. Unfortunately, they described a possibility rather than a person, leaving investigators with a portrait of skills instead of a name. As weeks turned into months, the investigation entered a quieter phase. The urgency surrounding the broadcasts gradually faded from public attention, but the technical work continued behind the scenes. Investigators revisited engineering reports, compared earlier conclusions, and tested alternative explanations against the available evidence. Cases like this rarely end with a single dramatic discovery. More often, they advance through repeated examination, where old information is viewed from a different angle in the hope that an overlooked detail might suddenly acquire new meaning. The recordings remained the center of that effort. Every frame and every second of audio had already been examined many times, yet investigators continued returning to them because they represented the only direct connection to the unknown broadcaster. Improvements in analytical techniques encouraged renewed optimism from time to time. Details that once appeared insignificant could be enlarged, isolated, or measured more carefully than before. Even so, each closer examination produced the same unusual outcome. The recordings revealed remarkable detail about the performance while remaining remarkably silent about the identity of the performer. Attention occasionally shifted toward individuals who seemed capable of carrying out such an operation. People with broadcasting experience, technical training, or knowledge of transmission systems naturally attracted curiosity. Some names surfaced through rumors, informal discussions, or anonymous suggestions, but none developed into a case supported by convincing evidence. Investigators understood the importance of separating possibility from proof. Technical ability alone could not establish responsibility, and speculation without evidence risked distracting attention from the careful standards required in a serious investigation. This disciplined approach explains why the mystery has remained unsolved rather than prematurely closed. Authorities resisted the temptation to identify a suspect simply because someone appeared to fit part of the profile. Instead, they required evidence that could withstand careful scrutiny. That standard protected the integrity of the investigation, even though it also meant accepting long periods without visible progress. In many unsolved cases, patience becomes an essential part of the process, allowing uncertainty to remain where certainty cannot honestly be claimed. Eventually, the investigation reached a point familiar to many complex historical mysteries. Every available lead had been explored as far as the evidence allowed. Broadcast experts had reconstructed the technical challenge. Federal authorities had examined the legal and investigative possibilities. Recordings had been studied repeatedly, and potential explanations had been tested against the known facts. Yet the final connection between the evidence and the individual responsible never appeared. The case was not abandoned because it lacked effort. It endured because every serious attempt to solve it encountered the same quiet obstacle. The mystery had been carefully investigated from many directions, but the unknown broadcaster had left behind a puzzle whose final piece seemed to vanish at the very moment the signal disappeared from the air. In the years that followed, the investigation settled into an unusual place between history and possibility. The official record preserved what could be confirmed, while the unanswered questions continued to invite careful discussion among engineers, journalists, and researchers. Every few years, renewed interest brought fresh attention to the case. Someone would revisit the recordings, propose another technical explanation, or suggest a different interpretation of the available evidence. Yet each renewed effort arrived at much the same conclusion. The mystery remained open, not because people had stopped looking, but because the surviving evidence had already revealed nearly everything it was capable of revealing. The case also demonstrated the limits of even the most thorough technical investigation. Modern society often assumes that complex technology automatically produces complete answers. The Max Headroom hijacking quietly challenged that belief. Sophisticated equipment recorded the intrusion, experienced investigators analyzed the evidence, and federal authorities examined the available facts with considerable care. Even so, the identity of the unknown broadcaster remained beyond reach. The investigation succeeded in explaining much of the method while failing to uncover the individual responsible. Those two outcomes existed side by side without contradicting one another. Perhaps the most remarkable achievement belonged not to the investigators or the hijacker, but to the evidence itself. The recordings survived with enough clarity to preserve every strange moment for future generations. They allowed historians, engineers, and curious viewers to examine the same event decades later with fresh eyes and improved technology. Few unsolved cases offer such direct access to the original evidence. Yet this rare advantage carried an unexpected frustration. The clearer the recordings became, the more obvious it was that visibility alone could not guarantee understanding. There is a quiet lesson hidden within that outcome. Every investigation depends upon a relationship between evidence and interpretation. Facts can describe an event with remarkable precision, yet they cannot always reveal the intentions, identities, or private decisions that produced it. The Max Headroom hijacking sits precisely at that boundary. It offers enough information to understand how extraordinary the intrusion was, while withholding the final answers that would transform mystery into history. The unknown broadcaster remains visible only through a carefully chosen disguise, and that disguise continues to protect its secret long after the original technology has faded into the past. With the investigation reaching its natural limits, the story now turns toward the ideas that filled the silence left behind. When official answers proved incomplete, theories began to emerge from broadcasters, hobbyists, journalists, and ordinary observers alike. Some focused on technical possibilities. Others searched for hidden motives behind the performance. In the next part, we step into that landscape of competing explanations, where every theory appears to illuminate one corner of the mystery while leaving another quietly in shadow. The investigation has reached the edge of what the evidence can honestly prove, but the mystery is far from over. In the next episode, releasing in 48 hours, we explore the competing theories, the lingering questions, and the reason this extraordinary broadcast continues to defy explanation decades later.